Homage to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Today, let's talk about the weight of the challenges of practicing in today's world. It's a huge topic, actually, and one that when you talk with your Kalyana Mitta, you find that everyone is struggling in one way or another, and particularly with speculation about the world. It's such a huge area of dissent, polarization, and very, very strong views. Many of us do at times fall for some of what is going on. And if we're honest, we actually fall for many, many things a lot of the time, and only through meditation or turning to Buddha Dhamma Sangha do we bring ourselves out of it. And so sometimes this can be very similar to being on the train to Nibbana. So you decide to take refuge in Buddha Dhamma Sangha. You jump on the train, which is the Noble Eightfold Path. Yet along the way, the train decides to stop. And you decide to take some of those stops. And the problem with that is that, as we said before, there's a tendency to delay, to veer off the path, to go in a different direction and maybe get lost in that direction and not find our way back onto the train that is the Noble Eightfold Path. Sometimes we can see it happening very consciously because we deliberately choose it, or at other times it's very unconscious and you just end up somewhere else. You end up in a very strong wrong view. And it could be by nature of what is happening in the world. And so right now, when you try to practice, it seems as if there's so many other obstacles that seem very, very important and very, very real. And it's not to diminish what is happening in each individual's life, but it's also very important to make sure you stay on the train to Nibbana. Now, the thing about the world is that we have this sutta called the Acinteyya Sutta, and it's in the Anguttara Nikaya, and it talks about what Buddha considers inconceivable matters. So the first inconceivable matter is the domain of the Buddhas. The second is the domain of one in jhana. The third is the result of kamma. And the fourth is speculation about the world. But it's the fourth one that is most interesting, and that is speculation about the world. And usually when people look at that particular item in the suttas, they say it's about how the world is created, how it is formed, how the sun comes to be, how the moon is, how large is the solar system, and all those types of questions. But also under that would be things about the soul, the self. Things like that also come into speculation about the world. So when you think about this as an inconceivable matter, and then you understand that the Buddha says, if one tries to think and reason and research the answer to these questions, you end up either in madness or frustration. And that is something that you can see right now. Maybe each of us can own up to a little bit of having this either madness or frustration when we try and figure out what is happening in the world. Or maybe you can see it in other people. Sometimes it's easier to look out and see it in somebody else rather than ourselves. You see someone deeply troubled and trying to figure out, why is this happening? What's apparent is that there are so many things that people are speculating about the world. If we run through a few topics, for example, people are always questioning who rules the world, who has the world power. Then you look at people getting very entrenched and into issues such as gender issues. Then there's race issues. There's equality issues. corruption in politics, corruption in the world in general, then there's all this speculation about the history that people believe is true, history that people believe is not true, and who is doctoring that history. So it goes from the ancient Phoenicians, Babylonians, Egyptians, Atlantis, all the way to modern history about Hitler, the world wars, and the history of each country, all those sorts of things. And then even people speculate about aliens and other sorts of things. And then people, of course, end up speculating about how the world is created, what is of this world and of the other worlds. And then you come back to modern things like, what is real money? And where are we going with artificial intelligence? And is the world about to collapse, both financially and just generally? And even when it comes to what we're experiencing right now with coronavirus, the question comes in, what is real medicine? And the ins and outs of all sorts of different permutations of what side of the fence you sit on. Alternative medicine, pharmaceutical medicine, this doctor, that doctor, all kinds of things. And ultimately it comes down to also, who can you trust? And it's a very difficult thing when it comes to Dhamma practice to admit that the mind is full of doubt and the mind is going outwards into things that are not the Buddha's teaching. They're actually not things that Buddha recommends that we try and figure out. These are worldly things. We'll never come to the end of it. We'll never find the real truth. He actually says that it's unthinkable, it's inconceivable. So no matter how much research you do, you won't find the true answer. Instead, Buddha says, focus on the Noble Eightfold Path, the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, the path that gets you out of all this suffering. Because what is true is that we really do suffer. We suffer with the unknown. We suffer with the little bits we find out. We try and piece them together, just like the people who are researching them. They also try and piece it together. And we don't end up in a very good place because we don't know what is really true. And that is also a test of our saddha, because if we truly have confidence in Buddha Dhamma Sangha, then we wouldn't turn to these things that are inconceivable. We wouldn't be searching for answers in the wrong place. And unfortunately right now what you see is both lay people and monastics turning to become researchers about the world. And the outcome is never good, because what the Buddha says in the sutta is that you end up in madness or you end up in frustration. And so what you find is when you talk to your Kalyana Mitta, whether they're monastics or lay people, they're either very angry, whether they try and say it in a nice way, but underneath there is a lot of anger about the world, what is happening in the world. And rightly or wrongly, but the point of the matter is that there is still anger. So it becomes that you're on the hatred path, the hatred and delusion, and ultimately greed, hatred and delusion. They all actually go together. What we like is for things to be smooth, easeful, not to have dukkha in the world. But the fact is, samsara is like that. It is imbued with greed, hatred and delusion. There are rulers in the world. There is injustice. There is karma, the ripening of karma. People are in certain circumstances due to what they have done in the past. So we are the same. And so when we try and fathom it, and you listen to where people are when they take on the world, you find that they're extremely disturbed. And it's not in a derogatory way, it's in just a way of understanding what is going on. Because when you elect to take that stop. So get off the train on the Noble Eightfold Path. You get off at the stop that says, okay, this is the stop for finding out about aliens. This is the stop that is interested in finding out more about political corruption. This is the stop that's interested in climate change. This is the stop that's interested in ancient Babylonia. This is the stop that's interested in the world is eternal. And where does that take you? Most of the time, it takes all of your time outside of your usual duties and responsibilities into research, into listening to other people who are not the Buddha or the Noble Arahants. It could be newsreaders. It could be researchers on the internet. It could be documentaries created by people who you don't really know who they are, who they work for. It could be history books where we don't know where did that person really sit in history? What was their viewpoint? More often than not, the people that we incline towards in the world, we can't be sure that they're coming from a moral compass that is the same as Buddha and the Noble Arahants. And so we're sometimes too easy to trust that, and we veer off. In simple terms, because we have doubt towards Buddha Dhamma Sangha, we get drawn out. And the strong message that you get, particularly from the Buddha and the Noble Arahants, is don't waste time. Don't waste time on finding out about something that is inconceivable, something that is damaging, something that can delay you, something that can completely take you off the road to Nibbana. And it's to your own detriment. As Kalyanamitta, we have to remind each other, come back to Buddha Dhamma Sangha, come back to the Noble Eightfold Path. See the dukkha in what you are doing. More often than not, we get drawn out to take that stop off the train is because we take things as personal dukkha. We worry about our loved ones. We worry inherently about ourselves. And so we develop very strong views that create more fear, more anxiety, more stress. We know from the four nutriments that there are these foods that we indulge in, and the one known as mano sancetana ahara, the mental volition as nutriment, is we have all these perceptions that end up becoming very strong views about me and mine. And we know that we go the wrong way with fear. When you speak to people who are in Dhamma, you find that they start telling you about all these very, very strong views. It doesn't really matter what they are, but they're not associated with liberation. It becomes about all sorts of worldly things. And you see them get extremely disturbed and extremely angry, frustrated. And underlying to that is fear. Fear is also another word for dukkha. And the Buddha discourages from falling for those things. We become fearful when we have these wrong views. We take certain things as me and mine, and some of these views become strongly my views. What's really important sometimes to disassemble where it comes from is really to look sometimes at the people that we're turning to who are not Buddha, who are not the Noble Arahants. And there's this sutta called the, Sattajaṭila Sutta. It's in chapter 3, discourse number 11. And it's about really knowing another person's character. We rely usually on listening to people. We don't know what their moral code is. We don't know what they believe in an ultimate sense. And we trust what they say because they join the dots of certain things and they sound so compelling, or they look really nice. But the problem is, unless they are walking the Buddha's path, it's very, very precarious to trust people like that. So this particular sutta is about King Pasenadi of Kosala, and he comes to see the Buddha, and when he approaches the Buddha, there are sets of different ascetics walking past. They've returned from somewhere. So there's 7 Jatilas, 7 Nikantas, 7 naked ascetics, 7 one-robed ascetics, 7 wanderers. It's described as with hairy armpits, long fingernails, long body hairs, carrying bundles of their requisites. And so King Pasenadi venerates them, and then after that he has a dialogue with the Buddha. So he basically says to the Blessed One that he points out to these ascetics of various kinds, and he says, those Venerable Sir are to be included among men in the world who are arahants, or who have entered upon the path to arahantship. So he's basically saying to the Buddha, those ones, because they look like ascetics, they look like they're keeping certain practices, austerities, then they must be on the path to Nibbana. They either have attained or they're on that path. And the Buddha's response is very interesting. It's very useful to us, because the Buddha actually says, Great King, being a layman who enjoys sensual pleasures, dwelling in a home crowded with children, enjoying the use of Cajun sandalwood, wearing garlands, scents, and unguents, receiving gold and silver, it is difficult for you to know whether these are arahants or those have entered upon the path to arahantship. And then he gives how you would know, the type of thing you would need to do. And he says, it is by living together with someone, Great King, that his virtue is to be known, and that after a long time, not after a short time, by one who is attentive, not by one who is inattentive, by one who is wise, not by a dullard. So that's the first thing. You need to live with someone for a long time to be able to see. The second one is, it is by dealing with someone, Great King, that his honesty is to be known. And that after a long time, not after a short time, it goes on in the same way. So the first one is you need to live with someone to know their virtue. The second is to deal with someone to know whether they're honest. The third one is, it is in adversities, Great King, that a person's fortitude is to be known. And so that third one is really only in the face of, dire situation would you see that person's mettle, their resilience, their fortitude, what they're made out of in a bad situation. And then the last one is, it is by discussion with someone, Great King, that his wisdom is to be known. And again, after a long time, not a short time, when you're attentive, not inattentive, and by one who is wise, not a dullard. So only by speaking to them do you actually hear whether they're wise or they're actually foolish. And after a long time, you pay attention to that. So that's the thing. We trust very easily people we don't spend a lot of time with, or people that we spend time with, but we don't know what it's like to live with them. So we don't know what their moral code is really. And at the same time, in a bad situation, we don't really know for sure, like what it would really be like. It's very easy for someone to just speak and to behave in a particular way, but without really knowing them, it's very hard to be sure. Yet we're so easy to trust those words. And at the same time, shame on us, but we're quite easy to doubt the Buddha's words, and those are the noble arahants. It's just how it goes. There's a interrelationship there. We're so easy to read books and trust those words, not knowing where those people were coming from. And we're so easy to trust people on social media, or to watch a short clip of a video that has been cut in a particular way and to trust that, than to really trust in the Buddha's words. When you read and you listen to the Buddha's words, you really get this sense of real care and concern for all living beings. You get a real sense that the right path is what the Buddha is pointing to, and to be very cautious about all other paths. In actual fact, the Buddha is saying, go non-stop towards Nibbana. There is this sense of samvega, urgency. Don't delay. And he says that not just to human beings, but to all living beings, including the devas. Every time they come to him and they recite something to him that they think they've understood, if they are wrong, he corrects them. And quite pointedly, in order to not delay, particularly with the devas, because their lifespan is so long. And yet when it's long, when they fall, they can fall from a higher deva realm to a lower one, but eventually some of them can fall immediately to the hells. So there are suttas where you hear that a deva is sitting in a beautiful garden surrounded by 500 beautiful devas, and suddenly the 500 devas disappear and they've reappeared in the hell realms. And the one that still remains gets frightened and goes to the Buddha and says, what happened? And then that deva gets a sense that it's his turn next, his or her turn next. And they realize from speaking to the Buddha that they're not eternal, that they actually are also in a temporary existence, although it's long. And so for us, again, it's very good to remind each of us, to all our Kalyanamitta, to be very cautious with speculation about the world, particularly when the world is so challenging, to actually start to look at renunciating the world, because unless we renunciate the world, which is a very big challenge, we will keep veering off the path to Nibbana, and we will keep delaying, disturbing our own minds, because we are the ones that elect to go and look. We are the ones that take responsibility and go and watch things, read things, listen to things that are not Buddha Dhamma. So when you end up with a mind that is disturbed, you can't sleep because you're worried, you can't eat because you're worried, you get angry at the slightest thing, you argue with people about worldly matters, then something is not right in the practice. So this applies to all of us. It's not any one person. It applies to lay people, it applies to monastics. And you hear it in the undertone of the voice. It becomes deeply disturbed. It becomes, by the end of the conversation, the person is outwardly angry. Not by anything you've said, but what they're explaining to you about what they've gathered from the world. This is also Mara coming to challenge us. When you read the Mara Samyutta, and you read the Bhikkhu Samyutta and the Bhikkhuni Samyutta, or maybe it's called the Kosala Samyutta, but these earlier suttas that appear in the Samyutta Nikaya, Mara comes to invoke fear, terror, and anxiety in those that are meditating. He comes and he brings gender issues. There's a sutta where a bhikkhuni is meditating and he tells her, you can't do this because you're a woman, and you should just give it up because you'll never achieve the final goal. And she turns around to him and basically says, friend, I don't believe you. It doesn't matter whether I'm a man, it doesn't matter whether I'm a woman. What I know is the Buddha's words, and it is possible for me to reach the final goal. And then he comes again and he makes certain things like the earth shake or loud noises or various things to demean, demoralize you. But what happens is each and every time that person who is meditating turns and says, friend, to Mara, and says, I see you, I acknowledge what you say, but I don't believe you. And Mara slinks away thinking, this person knows me, and Mara is disappointed because you didn't fall for it. So when it comes to these worldly things, again, it's the same thing. It's like Mara giving you a prank call. You know, those calls where someone calls you and just hangs up. They're not nice. But it's a bit like that someone is calling you and saying, come and look at this thing about Hitler. Come and look at this thing about conspiracy about someone ruling the world. Come and look at this about the medical industry. Come and look at this about ancient Babylonia. Come and look at this about aliens. Whatever it is, I'm picking some of the most out there topics because I think it's the only way to actually wake up. And what you realize when you delve into it is that you need to say no thank you. Buddha often gives this thing when it comes to someone serving you something that is not for you, that it is not part of right view and the Noble Eightfold Path. You actually say no thanks. And so who ends up with that dish that has been served? The person that is serving it to you. So when Mara slinks away, it is Mara who still holds on to that dish that he tried to serve you. Likewise, when people come and trouble you, knowingly or unknowingly, often it's because they think they're coming from a good place. So it's not always that they're being facetious or nasty. It's that they do truly believe they're coming to help you. But often you can kindly say, I'm okay, thanks. That's not for me. And so they're left with what they've offered. And if they're muddle-minded, then they will still be muddle-minded. But we don't need to be muddle-minded. And it takes a lot of knowing. There's this thing in the same sutta, this Sattajaṭila Sutta. At the end, he says, a man is not easily known by outward form, nor should one trust a quick appraisal. For in the guise of the well-controlled, uncontrolled men will move in this world, like a counterfeit earring made of clay, like a bronze half-penced coated with gold. Some move about in disguise, inwardly impure, outwardly beautiful. So there are a lot of deceivers in the world, is basically what the Buddha is saying. We can't know for sure. They appear very nice on the outside, but inside they're impure. They're filled with defilements, low morality. They're very unwise. They don't know the Buddha's teachings. And so when we give our trust to them, we are doing a wrong to our own practice. And so it's very important not to trust so quickly and to really abandon. When you think about what the Buddha calls parinya, parinya is something that we spoke about when we looked at the Sekapatipada Sutta. And parinya appears many times in the Buddha's teaching because it's when you have full understanding, when you have complete knowledge. And there's three categories that the Buddha talks about. Buddha talks about jnata parinya, tirana parinya, and pahana parinya. So jnata parinya is really when you really know that you have a real knowing, a real realization. And it's a very difficult one. So it's a bit like knowing that you're on this train to Nibbana and knowing that you don't want to get off for all these different views, opinions about the world, or for any other kind of distraction. There is a real knowing when you really see it like, oh, this is a prank call. This is something to delay me, distract me, trouble me. Then that can be like jnata parinya, because what you call upon is the Buddha's teachings. Most often, it's the results of the meditation, it's the Buddha's words that help you with jnata parinya, that you know. You've heard it from someone wiser than you. And then tirana parinya is where you've measured it, judged it, and you decide. So wise judgment comes from the first knowing, which is the jnata parinya, but then the measuring of it. So when you measure people that you're listening to that are not worthy to be listening to, you decide, I'm not going to listen to them anymore. When you see, okay, I have this option to delay my practice, and it's not always as simple as that, but you decide, no, I'm not getting off the train to Nibbana. I'm not going to waste my time researching about aliens. I'm not going to waste my time researching about political corruption in my country or any other country. I'm not going to try and figure out what's real money and all kinds of different financial issues that come to the mind. And pahana parinya is when you really let it go. You really go, I'm never looking at that website again. I'm not going to do any research on it. I'm really going to give it up. I'm going to abandon it. And all I'm going to focus on is Buddha Dhamma. I'm adamant about the Buddha's teachings. I heed the Buddha's teachings. I have no doubt. So earlier when we spoke about false narratives, if your practice is strong, it's very easy to say and to really mean it. I'm not taking anything outside of Nibbana as the truth. But it's a lot harder in practice. because of where we're at, whether we have path and fruit, and also because some of these things are very, very enticing. And most often than not, with worldly matters, there's a love-hate relationship. Even the hate for it draws us in. We abhinandana, we take delight in even trying to figure things out and trying to be right about them. There's a real sense of me when you research it and think you figure it out and become to very strong views and adamant about it, and you speak with authority and develop a lot of conceit. So there's a lot of breeding of defilements when it comes to wrong view, and so you're very fearful of being wrong, of being attacked for your view, of your view falling apart, and these are worldly views. So that is a very difficult situation to be in. So the strong encouragement, of course, is when you actually apply the Jnata Parinya, Tirana Parinya, Pahana Parinya, you're really coming from whatever you've gathered in your meditation, whatever you've gathered in your taking refuge in Buddha Dhamma Sangha, the confidence you have, the knowledge that you have, the insight that you have, and you're really applying it back out so you don't get troubled in your practice. That's how it works. You keep doing it. It's an iterative process. It's an active process. But the encouragement is take the non-stop train to Nibbana. Don't keep getting off. Don't keep getting delayed and duped. Don't fall for the people that you don't really know whether you can trust them. But you do know Buddha's words. You see the results of your meditation. You can trust in Buddha Dhamma Sangha because you see it for yourself. That Dhamma is directly known for yourself when you actually attend to it. And we have all these very good examples in the Sangha. Those 4 pairs, 8 kinds of noble beings. When you spend time with all the venerables, Venerable Mahamoggallana, Visakha, the laywoman, Anathapindika, you see how they have walked this path, how they have attained path and fruit, and those that have actually attained arahantship. It's very, very inspiring. So I think we can leave it here. Take what you will of it. It's not an easy area. It's an area where we're all challenged right now. But it's very good to be reminded to take great care to abandon speculating about the world. Do what you need to do in living in the world, but nothing more than that. Focus on the right path, not on all the wrong things, not on the things that cannot be worked out. They're unthinkable, inconceivable. Draw yourself back. Help your friends who are falling for that if you can, but make sure you yourself that you draw back. And remember your sila, remember the moral code. Let's share the merit with all sentient beings. May all beings be happy and well. May all beings be free from suffering. Blessings of the Triple Gem. Wishing you well. Teruan Saranai.